people are like day trading Facebook ads. So if they put it up and they see within a day or two it doesn't work, they don't try to change it and keep iterating or actually give the algorithm time to figure it out. Because we found that like there's something called creative wear-in, that some types of creative just take longer to really lift off and perform. So you need to give it some longer time. And whenever we put anything up or we try anything new, we actually formulate hypothesis as to, okay, this is the amount of time we're going to give for testing. This is the sort of placements we're going for. And this is the sort of response that we're looking for to show us this type of message will work.
You're listening to the Ecommerce Influence Podcast with Austin Bronner and Andrew Foxwell. If you want honest, transparent, and tangible results that deliver lasting value and revenue, this is your podcast.
It's safe to say that most of us have been doing a lot more shopping online lately. And if you're an e-commerce brand, that means you might be seeing more first-time customers. Once they've made that first purchase, how do you keep them coming back? That's what Klaviyo is for. Klaviyo is the ultimate marketing platform for e-commerce brands. Klaviyo gives you the tools to build your contact list, to send memorable emails, automate those key messages, and more. A lot more. That's why more than 40,000 e-commerce brands like Chubbies, 8 Sleep, and Living Proof, including most of my clients, use Klaviyo to build a loyal following. Strong customer relationships mean more repeat sales, enthusiastic word of mouth, and less depending on expensive third-party ads. Whether you're launching a new business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo can help you get growing faster. Plus, it's free to get started. Just visit klaviyo.com/influence to create your free account today. That's KLAVIYO.com/influence. You may know Justuno for pop-ups, but if you haven't checked them out recently, they're a full-blown conversion rate optimization platform. Yes, they've got pop-ups, but also they've got AI product recommendations, exit offers, a Facebook Messenger, SMS, capture, and a lot more. Brands like Pure Vita Bracelets, Rothy's, and Movement use Justuno to capture and nurture their traffic all the way to conversion. I recommend Justuno to my clients as a top conversion rate optimization tool. Now, you can use AI cross-sells and upsells directly in-page or in-cart with Justuno Plus for higher average order value. Justuno Commerce AI takes in your product catalog and then will display smart recommendations based on visitor behavior. If you want to create a seamless experience from offsite all the way to onsite with unified messaging, you got to check out Justuno. Head over to justuno.com/influence to learn more. That's JUSTUNO.com/influence. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Ecommerce Influence Podcast. My name's Austin Bronner, and every once in a while, you meet somebody, and when you meet them, you kind of take a note and you say to yourself, I think that person has got it. That person is going to be on a special and unique journey. And today's podcast, I'm bringing you an episode with someone who I've known for a while is going to be on a very special and unique journey. His name is Justin Maddahi. I first got to know Justin, I think over 2.5 years ago. We started emailing me. He was a podcast listener, and I got a couple emails from him. And about 2 years ago, he joined the Brand Guild and we started working together. He's the co-founder and head of digital at Lumineux Oral Essentials. And they have been on a rocket ship of growth, especially over the last really like 8 months. And what's so unique about this episode is I had Justin on about a year ago, a little bit less than a year ago, and he was talking about how their company had doubled over the previous 12 months and what he'd learned from really dialing in his Facebook messaging. And they actually had found a system to drive consistent sales. Now, what's happened in the last 8 months is they've just ramped that up. In this episode, he dives into why that's happened. Talks about the ups and downs of crazy growth, growing as fast as 70% month over month. Talks about his mindset and how he shifted. We go into the importance of creative and what that means to the business. We talk about building a team, long-term thinking. He shares some really good pieces of advice if you're looking for success that like if you're looking and you listen to podcasts and you hear people who've broken through and you're like, oh man, I just wish I could break through. He shares really what he's learned during this time in a pretty like raw, unfiltered way that you can take and hopefully transfer into your own business. The episode is really good. It's both tactical and also bigger picture. Justin is so sharp. He's such a hard worker and a pleasure to work with. So I'm really excited to bring him on the show. Justin, welcome.
Thanks for having me back, Austin. Excited to be back too.
Yeah, man. I wanted to bring you back on because it's been kind of a wild ride. I was looking back at when the last episode, we recorded an episode, I think we recorded in September, and it was released mid-October. And what the last episode we did was about how you doubled your business in like over in a year.
Yep.
But basically from that point on, you've been on an even crazier ride than I think anyone could have predicted. Today I think we're right in the middle of summer, and you've been on an absolute wild ride since September. I gave a little intro earlier about who you are, but why don't you kind of dive in and tell a little bit about where you were a year ago and what has kind of happened in the last, I guess, really like 10 months.
Yeah, it's definitely been a really fun time. Also, very scary too when you're growing that fast. There's a lot of inventory issues that you run into, shipping issues. So you kind of have to be able to work in operations, marketing, and also hiring people. So that's some of the stuff that I've been doing. But in terms of a little bit of a background, uh, as I mentioned in the last podcast I was on, I'm the head of online sales and marketing at Lumineux. We're the only non-toxic and microbiome safe and enamel safe teeth whitening company on the market. What makes us different is basically the ingredients that we use, and also all the clinical studies that we've done. We have about 50 clinical studies that we've done with third-party laboratories and independent universities. So it's definitely those are the main things that separate us. And basically, where we were at last year is we were able to get the Facebook ads to really start working for us. We figured out a marketing formula, the type of content that works for us. We also came out with a website that was performing at a really good conversion rate. But over the last 10 months, we've diversified quite a bit. We have a strong Amazon presence now, which we put a lot of effort in. We've opened up other channels such as Snapchat, influencer marketing even more. And we've also done a lot of work on our email marketing. And what I found is that when you want to grow fast, you can't just rely on one channel, because when you're in these high auction based advertising channels, things go up and down, and it's really hard to just ride the wave sometimes. So we've diversified quite a bit. We've relied heavily on our repeat customer rate, because our product is highly reviewed, and we get a ton of 5-star reviews. We've been able to also rely on just getting that repeat customer rate and subscription.
Sure. Well, let's dive into it a little bit, because it's been awesome. I've been we've been working together for almost 2 years, and I've been had a front row seat every every week or two,
Yeah.
connecting and hearing what's been going on. And it's been very interesting because you mention riding this wave of growth, which you guys have really been on. And I want to kind of take it back to, last year around, right, when we recorded that podcast, because you mentioned that you guys you kind of figured out the marketing formula.
Yeah.
And then over the last 10 months, but the 6-7 months right after that, you guys were riding like a crazy wave of just growth month over month over month. Once you guys figured out that formula, what changed, if anything, that allowed you to continue to like really ratchet it up month in and month out to grow?
Yeah, so we've been able to really grow from UGC content. And I think what has caused that growth is that we're constantly analyzing, and we're very sophisticated with the way we approach our advertising channels and the content that we put out. So, like for example, with Facebook ads, we don't only look at CPA and ROAS, we look at the CPMs, the quality ranking, the relevant score, the click through rate percentage, and a bunch of other metrics before we decide, okay, this ad is doing well or not. And one of the things that I also see is common is like they're like people are like day trading Facebook ads. So if they put it up and they see within a day or two it doesn't work, they don't try to change it and keep iterating or actually give the algorithm time to figure it out. Because we found that like there's something called creative wear-in, that some types of creative just take longer to really lift off and perform. So you need to give it some longer time. And whenever we put anything up or we try anything new, we actually formulate hypothesis as to, okay, this is the amount of time we're going to give for testing. This is the sort of placements we're going for. And this is the sort of response that we're looking for to show us that this ad or this type of message will work. So we're not looking at it like, oh, it works or it doesn't work. We're trying to really dig in and figure out how do we get this message to work? What are the comments saying? How about the likes? We're looking at everything.
Are you looking at this daily, every week?
Oh, it's a daily thing. I personally work 365, 24/7. I believe especially in e-commerce because it's like each day is different, each month is different. Pre-COVID, during COVID is a completely different time. And now that the second wave of COVID hit, it's completely different than the first wave of COVID. So you really need to be tuned in and looking at all the metrics and understand what's happening all the time because it's constantly changing. Especially right now, it's just really crazy. Like each day is a new day. There's new problems that we run into, but we're just pushing through. We're getting sophisticated with our marketing channels, and we're looking at numbers constantly.
Sure. Back at the beginning of the year, we sat down. I remember having a conversation with you, and you kind of laid out your growth goals for the year,
Yeah.
and you had some very like lofty.
Yeah, I did.
One of the reasons that brought you back was to talk about this crazy ride. So you sat there at the beginning of the year, you had these goals, and you're like, "This is what we want to hit this year." How has this year, and how is growing your business and hitting those growth goals? Have you already hit those growth goals for the entire year or gotten close?
We're about, I think, like in 10 more days, we will have hit it.
Beginning of the year, we sat there and we're like, oh, these look like really lofty goals. You've hit them by middle of the summer.
Yeah.
How has growing the business as fast as you have been different from what you imagined it would be like?
So I actually, when I was showing you those projections, I remember it. I was thinking it was going to be a lot easier in some ways than what it actually was. I think it took just a ton of hard work and teamwork. There's just constantly, it's just a ton of pressure, especially when you're growing. I think the main thing that we ran into is just like inventory problems. I know that for like a period during COVID, there was like a 2 week delay on our products. We were screaming at all the manufacturers. Some of our manufacturers were making hand sanitizers and stuff. So it was really hard for them to like make mouthwash, toothpaste, and whitening strips. That was the main thing I didn't know is just how much the inventory issues that you run into. And then from that, since you're growing so fast, you need to purchase like 3 months of inventory in advance. So it puts also a lot of pressure on cash flow. So there's a lot of different things that go in with growth. You're thinking like, oh, it's the most amazing thing, but it can also kill you, which I think is amazing. We were able to survive it because we're very smart with our money. We're looking at problems in the future. But like whenever I talk to someone and I tell them like, oh, we're growing this fast, they get so excited and they're like, oh, you're probably having the time of your life. When it's like we're every other week, I'm like screaming about something or I'm upset about something just because everything breaks when you grow that fast. And you just have to be prepared for that.
Could you maybe put some perspective around some of the growth that you've faced since the beginning of the year or since September?
Yeah, so I think from the beginning of the year, the last 6 months, we were growing at like 20 to 30% month over month. So it's like pretty serious growth. I think from March to April, we grew about 50%, and then another 70% from April to May. So it's like it's pretty intense growth because like every single month it's incrementally growing. It's pretty crazy.
That's absolutely crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
when you think about a lot of uh, software companies that are fast growing, if you look at like an accelerator, often they'll talk about like you're targeting 5% month over month growth,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And when you hit 70%, almost doubling the business in like 2 months. And again, the previous time you were on this podcast, we talked about what it was like to go double it in a year, and now
yeah,
it's happening in like a month and a half,
yeah.
almost 2 months. For you personally, how has your role changed throughout this growth over the last 6 8 months?
Yeah, so I think there's multiple facets to that question. I think the first thing, the role that I've taken on more is there's a hiring aspect where I finally got an assistant. We're also bringing on agencies. I'm managing agencies. So we have an agency. We just actually hired an agency for our Facebook ads. We have for Amazon, for our email, for Google ads. So we try to keep our team really lean and just rely on expertise from agencies. And we push them really hard. I'm constantly emailing every agency that we work with from the morning until night, always trying to see what's happening, if there's any problems to handle them right away. So that's the first aspect that I'm doing. I think the second aspect is that I'm a lot more numbers driven than I was a year ago, and I bet you a year from now I'll be a lot more numbers driven. We've are actually looking at like a Google Data Studio performance dashboard on our Facebook ads now, so we get to see like the CPC versus the CPM, what's happened to the ROAS over a 30-day period, comparing different trends month over month. So, and then seeing what's the top creative, what are the top audiences. So I think that's the sophistication that I'm talking about, is that we're actually looking at real dashboards. And that's the common, when I talk to my friends who have built 9-figure businesses and have sold them, you really get an understanding of how sophisticated you have to be with your marketing. You really have to have ideas with what you want to do with every single ad you put out. How long of a given time period will you give for testing? So those are the two main roles. And then I think the last one is just aligning the team. We're communicating a lot more. We actually are working in an office and just getting the team and the camaraderie up. So those are the three main roles that I'm working on now.
What is your team? How has your team grown over the last 6 8 months? What would it look like back in September, and then what does it look like now? When I talk about your team, I think you can maybe split it between the like warehouse and marketing operations team, because I know you guys are a marketing operations company.
Yeah, so I think we have doubled our marketing team. Our operations has actually stayed the same. We've moved to a new 3PL who's amazing and deals with much bigger companies. So we're excited about that. And we have about 1 to 2 people in house now that are in operations that deal with fulfillment. We have a CFO. We now have a controller. And then in terms of the marketing side, we've added, I've gotten an assistant, and then our chief brand officer, Caroline, has got an assistant. And we've just added a bunch of agencies. So it's not a lot about internal growth. We've added like, I think 4 to 5 people over this 10-month period. We don't have very many people in our company compared to other people that are at our revenue growth. It's been more about us adding agencies and working with those agencies to fuel more growth.
We talked about your growth being so rapid, right? 70%, 50%, 20%
Yeah.
month over month. How do you think about and balance setting goals for the company, like longer term goals, and then short term goals that obviously you've been hitting quite quickly? What's been working for you around goal setting, or how do you think about it as you've been going through this type of growth?
Because we're way ahead of our projections and we're doing really well, we've shifted our focus to the long term vision of the company, which is enlightening people on the fact that, first of all, that 98% of the bacteria in your mouth is good for you and only 2% is bad. Yet when you look at mouthwashes like Listerine and other companies, it says kills 99.9% of the bacteria. So there's actually a microbiome in your mouth, similar to your gut microbiome, that you need to maintain this ecosystem there. And that's actually what gets rid of gum disease, inflammation, and all of these sorts of things. So we're focusing more on that message. Previously, we're more on like the whitening and just like normal toothpaste without the chemicals type thing and whitening strips without the chemicals. We're now shifting towards more of like a full on oral health, which was the first when my dad created this company. This was his idea, and this is what he was trying to work on. So we were coming out with a new website. We have a new CGI type video, which we're really excited about that we're going to be launching. So we're now trying to expand out of just the one type of channel that we're in, which is like the whitening and toothpaste category, into like full oral care health.
You'd mentioned one of the things that you've been working on is aligning the team.
Yeah.
Uh, what does that mean to you, and what are some of the things that you've been doing to align the team and that have been successful, or things you've learned during this time?
I think once you've worked at a company for 5 years, you find that there's a lot of fixed ideas and opinions, and certain people think we need to market to this core demographic, and certain people think we need to market to another core demographic, and that we need other types of marketing than we actually need, or we need to be on other channels. But so what basically aligning is just making sure that everyone, I think once people see numbers and they really get to see the logic behind everything that's going on, they agree with all the decisions that are being made. So one of the things that we do now is we have a weekly meeting going over all the different things that are happening in operations, happening in marketing, happening in our sales, retail sales. Because also when you grow this fast, there's a lot of things that break, which creates a lot of frustration and confusion as to, oh, is this person not working hard enough? Is that why uh, the shipments aren't going out and all that sort of stuff? So it's just like you just have to constantly be communicating with your team and trying to repair any of the mistakes that happen along the way.
One of the things that I noticed about you very early on when getting to know you was you have an incredible work ethic. You
Yeah.
work very, very hard. And, you mentioned 365, 24/7 as your work style. And
Yeah.
it's not that far off, right?
No,
You're up.
it's pretty crazy.
And with this growth, obviously, your work ethic has helped that happen. How how do you balance expectations for yourself with expectations for the team?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we found, I think out of everyone, my dad has a way better work ethic than me. He's up way earlier. He goes to sleep later than me. He's managing other companies as well. So that's kind of my inspiration to work so hard. But what we found is that when the top people in a company work very hard, a lot of the lower level people also put in that work ethic. So we found that everyone in the company is just working their ass off constantly because they're seeing my dad is sending emails at 4:30 in the morning, and at 1 a.m. at night, I'm constantly texting them. They can call me at 12 o'clock at night and I'll answer the phone and handle the problem. There's So it creates this whole atmosphere of like we're gonna work until we get something done, which I think is the only way when you're a startup and you're really trying to disrupt an industry or grow really fast. That's the only really real way to approach it. So I think that's one of the things that we noticed.
When you guys do have really big plans.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit about kind of your plans for the business and put it in perspective where you guys are where you are now and where you're trying to go?
Yeah, so I think our big play is going to be retail. We recently got into Walgreens right in the middle of COVID, and we were able to still, despite the traffic being down 50%, we were still able to hit hurdle rates. And we're trying to be in Walgreens, Target, CVS, expand our Whole Foods presence, Sprouts. And because 85% of oral care is purchased in store and 15% is purchased online. So what we're finding is that all of the e-commerce sales are great, but in order for us to really get to where we want to be, we need to be in retail and also have not just be a digital marketing company. We also need to have traditional media and mixed media. So that's been the real focus over the past 2, 3 months, is now that we've grown so fast and we've surpassed all our expectations, is how do we take it to the next level?
I'd love for you to dive into what you've been exploring, because much of your growth trajectory has been reliant on like just a few channels, right?
Yeah.
And this is starting to change. And when you talk about channels, it's paid social really has
Yeah.
been kind of a massive driver. What are some of the things that you've learned as you've been trying to diversify off of just being so reliant on paid social? What are some of the things that you've learned? What are some things that you wish you knew before you dove into this world of traditional other types of media and advertising?
Yeah, I think the main thing that we learned is that we've worked with multiple different experts who have a lot of big company experience and ones with emerging brand experience. And we've learned that every single person has a different opinion on what you should do, which adds a lot of complexity. So that's the stuff that we're actually going through right now, is what is the actual correct thing for the brand. And I think the main thing that anyone who wants to grow has to rely on is your understanding of the brand, where you should be, and of your customers. So now when we're looking at a channel, we're taking some of the findings that we found from Facebook, such as we perform much better with long form content. We don't do well with 5 to 10 second ads because just our message and our values can't be expressed that quickly. So with whatever channel we want to be in, there has to be a way for us to get in our 30 second, 1 minute, or even longer form content, like 45 minutes of my dad talking about the brand. We perform super well like that. So that's one of the takeaways that we've taken from paid social and are applying it to other media channels. I think the other thing is that each channel is completely different. The creative that you need is also different. So like for example, billboards is a lot more polished than Facebook ads is. Like UGC content works amazing for Facebook ads, but if you put like a landscape ad that you would use for billboards, it won't perform. So you need to also like have your testing budget set and be prepared for everything to go wrong in the beginning, because it's like you're learning a whole new game. They're not as similar as you think, and you have to like have your performance goals set before you approach it.
You're onto some really big stuff here, and I really want to dive into it because I think, especially from a podcast like this, right?
Yeah,
Or you can listen if you're listening in here and you're hearing what other business owners are doing, or you go to a conference back pre-COVID when there's conferences all over where you get these ideas about what you should do, right?
yeah,
And what channels you should try, and like you see somebody doing something, you're like, oh, I got to try that, and it's something you and I talk a lot about, which is it contextual? Is what somebody else is doing actually gonna transfer over to what works
sure, man.
for your business?
Yeah,
And I think that's the hardest thing, right? Because you're what you said about every single person telling you something different, right? You go to all these channel experts and they have their own view of how the channel is going to work. But to bring up a good example, you talked about billboards,
yeah,
and we've had people come on the podcast and had success with billboards. They talked about, I think it was Tuft and Needle. They came on and he was talking about how they had a lot of success. But the interesting thing about Tuft and Needle compared to your business is they don't need long form content.
no, yeah,
They don't need long form. They need it's easy when somebody can convey the message very quickly, like a mattress that is comfortable, but it's cheaper. It's a lot different than like your microbiome in your mouth. And like the idea that, the reason the 45-minute interview with your dad works so well is because it's like a transformation in people's mind that has to take
yeah,
place,
yeah,
that like, oh, I now understand that my mouth is more complicated than just kill all the germs in my mouth and make it smell good.
Yeah. And the best way I can explain it is like in the early 2010s, a lot of the companies were disrupting just based because they're in a new channel. So instead of being in retail, we're in e-commerce, and that was seen as disruptive. The type of disruption that we're trying to do is we're saying that like 70 years of oral care research was incomplete and wrong to some degree. And you actually need to change the way you think about your mouth. You need to change the way you think about your health. And that doesn't come in bite-sized pieces of content. It comes in an actual like explaining to people like the science behind it, and this is what's going on in a visually pleasing way. So like whenever I talk to someone and they ask me like, oh, what channel should I be on and all that sort of stuff, I'm telling them that you need to like, it's not like throwing shit against the wall, but it kind of is. It's like you need to test a lot of different channels and actually look at the numbers and see where you're getting traction and keep iterating. But you need to do it in a way where you're not spending boatloads of money. So there's a balance between the two of you need to figure out your messaging. The other thing is like, does your model work? Like your unit economics, does it work with an e-commerce model? Does it work better with retail? And does it work for the channels that you're in? So like, for example, Facebook ads, CPMs and the CPAs are just going up exponentially year after year. So it's making companies with lower AOV almost impossible to be profitable. So you need to think about all of these things before you approach a channel. Like for billboards, usually companies who have a higher AOV perform better because first of all, there's no like direct call to action there. It's more of like a brand awareness play. So you need to be able to handle a lot more spend in order to see the return on your brand over a longer period of time. So I feel like that's one of the things that I see in e-commerce is there's not yet there's like a kind of a lack of sophistication with all the channels, and there's a simplicity that's there, and that doesn't allow some companies to actually grow to where they're supposed to be. So yeah, that's a little bit of a rant, but
No, it's spot on. It's combined, I think, with a little bit of awareness about
yeah,
how your product is actually sold, right? And I saw, a company join the coalition fairly recently, and they sell coffee pods that are
yeah,
compostable,
mm,
right? So when you think about the message, that's a very quick transition from
yeah,
people understand what coffee pods are, and they understand that them being compostable is good for the environment.
yeah,
There's not much explaining that needs to be done.
yeah,
So your marketing is going to be different than what you guys are facing, or, and I also think often it goes like together a little bit, that the larger the idea, this isn't always true, but the larger the idea, or like the larger the disruption is going to be in a channel, usually requires more explanation. And the reason I say it's not always true is because you've got something like compostable coffee pods that will disrupt that industry, and it's very simple.
yeah.
It's like either a transfer of something that people understand with something new, or you create something like what you guys are doing, which is, which involves educating people and changing their mind entirely about how they think about oral health, which is really interesting.
Also, trying to be disruptive is a double-edged sword. I think the negative effect of trying to be disruptive is it takes a lot of capital, and people constantly underestimate how much it takes for like a new idea to spread around and to actually gain traction is just like it just is beyond your imagination. But then the bright side of being a disruptive company is you've actually built a brand based off values, and people are super dedicated to your company and are customers for life. So I always see there's always companies who just sell based on price, or it's just like a slightly different thing. And any VC backed company will come and just do the same thing and just has more money than you and will outspend you and will eventually beat you because it turns into a capital game. But if you're actually trying to change an idea and what your product is very different from others and people can't copy it because you have trademarks and just the way that the ingredients is, it's not an easy thing to do. You can really build a sustainable brand that's multi-generational and is worth a ton of money down the road.
It's hard, but when you get it right, like you guys are doing, the return is outrageous.
Yeah.
Right? Growing as fast as you guys have. I want to go
Yeah.
in and get a little bit tactical to some of the things that we've been talking about and you've been executing on. I'd love to talk a little bit about email, what you guys have learned, because you brought it up and it reminded me that what you guys were emailing 8 months ago is very different than what you're
Oh
emailing
yeah.
now. And the results have changed drastically. So where were you at and what have you learned through your iteration creative with email?
Yeah. So I think when I was talking to you, about 3% of our revenue was coming from email,
Yep.
which is really bad, honestly. And now it's about either 15 to 17%. And it's not like a super inflated numbers. It's actually a lot based on the campaign work that we've done. So what we found, which is similar to Facebook ads, is long form content performs really well on email for us, and it's copy based, so it's not very image driven or anything like that. Our chief brand officer Caroline is also an amazing copywriter. So once someone purchases a product or after a certain period of time, they get a bunch of text based emails on what separates our product from other companies and the type of ingredients that we use, the clinical studies that we've done. And we found that we get open rates between 25 to 30% on our campaign emails. The click through rate is above 3%. So we're hitting also all the hurdle marks that shows that uh, the campaign email that you're sending out is successful. So that's basically the main change that we've done is we've been going a lot more text based. We've also added an agency who's like cleaned up a lot of the flows. We found that, and one thing that I found is like if you're trying to grow really fast, you need a lot of professional help because you're going to find that you're not always going to know the best answer. So we were finding that a bunch of people who are on our like welcome sequence actually purchased before. So we actually used an agency to help clean up all of that and the segmentation and also making sure the flows are firing properly. So those are the two main things that happened over that 8-month period.
Goes back to like your thesis of needing a little bit more storytelling, needing to be able to communicate longer form. Like it all as you experiment with new channels, then you could take that and transfer it over.
Yeah.
Also want to dive into subscriptions because you went through and made some serious changes. What have you found as you were looking to increase the percentage of people taking subscription right away? And also around the retention side, what are some things you've learned during this subscription optimization sprint that you went on to really ramp it up?
Yeah, I think the main thing that if you want to drive subscriptions, you need to focus on is your buy box on your website and making it actually easy for one customers to subscribe. And then also once they subscribe is like, can they log into their account easily? Is it easy to cancel? Do you explain what type of products they get? Are the emails that once they subscribe, do they make sense? So that's normally where I find companies lacking is like, either there's not good functionality with their subscription buy box, or like once someone subscribes, it's very confusing. So you need to make that as simple as possible. And those are the things that I focus on over the last 6 months. When we made a change to our subscription buy box and our just buy box in general in November, and we saw a huge uptick in subscribers, but then we ran into other problems like customer service issues. So we had to redo like the recharge portal on our website and also make sure customize all the emails to subscribers as well to make sure like they really know that they're getting a subscription. This is when it's coming. It's coming every 1, 2, or 3 months. So it's just making things easier for the customers is actually the best way to drive subscription. And then once you've found a formula that works, promoting that to customers that have bought once but haven't bought again or have bought many times but aren't subscribed is the next step to do. And then the third step is like promoting your subscription in your Facebook ads and your Snapchat ads with your influencers and everything like that. Um, and I found that most companies that are able to figure out the subscription formula are able to scale much faster because you have that ARR and that recurring revenue that other companies really can't rely on. And you have more of like predictive models that can tell you, I know this is how much money we're going to get in. And it really does raise your blended ROAS over time, just because if someone's in a subscription, they're usually more likely to stay a customer than someone who's bought once, because it's just like they've made that decision once. It's just like it'll just constantly go rather than having to make the decision to purchase multiple times.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, the cost for acquisition on channels like Facebook, Instagram, it's gone up so much that if you get somebody on subscription, you're not paying for each transaction.
Yeah, our
Um,
LTVs are much higher with subscription customers than customers who just buy.
it's huge, and when you look at your valuation, also, when you're looking to sell a business, the more subscription revenue you have, the higher your valuation. The
Yeah,
more, the larger and more detailed your email list, the higher your valuation. The
yeah,
more SMS opt-ins, more customer information, all that stuff factors right in
yeah,
to it. I had a really good interview with Greg Williams, who was a member of the coalition who went through sold his business, and he made a good point. He was like, when you're selling your business, you are not selling your Facebook ad performance. That's not what you're getting paid for, because that's something that you can't predict in the future.
yeah.
It's like what you're getting paid for is you're getting paid for all the revenue that is going to come in the future. And what's better than people already buying a business that already has people on subscription?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the repeat customer rate, I think, is the most important metric that you should constantly be looking at, because it really shows like the power of your brand and if you're actually going to be able to handle auction based advertising channels such as Facebook, Snapchat, and Google. Because there's going to be some months that you're on fire with Facebook ads, and there's going to be some months that no matter what type of content you put out or no matter what you do, you won't be able to sell. So you need to have that repeat customer rate in place to really stabilize your business. And I find that most people don't put that much effort in on your repeat customers because they're like, oh, they bought the product, they'll buy it again. But I'm telling you, just sending emails constantly and communicating with them, there's a snowball effect that over time you've built a much stronger business that can handle the ups and downs of the economy and Facebook and advertising channels compared to just like a performance driven um, company that does well certain months and does terrible certain months.
I love it. You raise the floor.
Yeah.
You raise the floor so your worst month is not nearly as bad as it was, a
Yeah.
year ago. That's the goal, right? I
Yeah,
always
that
think
is.
about that. I'm like, how do we make the worst month a lot less bad than it could be? I want to go to some kind of more rapid fire questions here
Sure.
for you. Maybe not rapid fire, but they're just kind of more specific. One of them is, looking back over the last, since you took over and really were full time running the business, what's something that you that you have failed at in the business, and what have you learned from that?
I think what happens also when you're 365, 24/7 in a business is you sometimes lack perspective and you get angry at things and your emotions go up and down based on the results of how you're doing in sales one day or another. So that's one thing that I've been working on over the last, I think, 6 months is if it's a good day, it's a bad day. I know in the long term that I'm gonna win and I'm gonna bring in the revenue that I want. And it's just, these are just things that happen on my way to a goal. So especially when you have people working under you, you need to set an example. And also for your coworkers, you need to also not let your emotions affect other people. So I think that's one thing that I've been working on and one thing that I've partially failed at too.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And it's challenging, especially when the whole system is set up to, like, ring your phone as like a cha-ching and train
Oh
you that like
yeah.
that that's success.
And also with Facebook ads, I was basically a media buyer for the company. That's one of the most frustrating jobs you can ever have because, like, I was looking at it, I'm like, I'm basically buying a car every single day with the amount we're spending, maybe even two cars. Like, that's a lot of pressure that you have day in and day out to perform.
Yeah.
So also getting some space and like putting things in perspective and also just looking at numbers and not getting angry or putting in biases, but just looking at it scientifically makes a big difference.
What's one piece of advice that you would like to give to someone else who's listening, who's on their like e-commerce entrepreneur journey, and is looking at what you're doing and sees that as kind of the path they want to take?
Yeah, so I was definitely there 2, 3 years ago. I was in the same position as like listening to other people who are successful. And I was wondering, like, what am I missing? That why am I not there? Like, what am I missing? And I think the main things that I was missing is like you have to know that there's multiple, but I think the main thing is the importance of creative and your brand with your advertising, and how like each year Facebook ads is also getting a lot more competitive with the creative that's out there. So like if I was advertising, if I was doing what I'm doing in 2016 or 2015, I would have been $100 million company by now. I'd be far way ahead of everyone else. The CPAs are much lower, the CPMs were much lower. So just understanding that you're dealing with a competitive landscape that's constantly changing day by day, I think is one thing that I didn't understand. And a lot of the reasons why we weren't as successful in the beginning was just our creative wasn't up to that level and it didn't sell on social media. And then I think the next thing is just being like tough and dedicated because there's going to be certain days that just suck. And you're just going to need to push through it and organize. And you just have to constantly believe in what you're doing, but also be willing to be wrong and change on a dime when you see, okay, we found traction here. Let's expand it.
How do you recharge when you're feeling burned out?
I play a lot of sports. So, like, we have a ping pong table. We've gotten into ping pong because of COVID. So I play ping pong, I work out, go hiking, go by the beach. So I'm an active person. So I like those are the things that actually help me relax.
I'm right there with you, man. That's the same
Yeah,
thing. I try to get outside.
it's the way to
What?
go.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're in front of the computer for so long, right?
Oh yeah,
It's not natural to sit in front of a computer all
yeah,
day.
and I hate sitting. So it's been funny that like most of my job is just sitting, staring at a computer. Because like I love walking around, playing sports, anything competitive. Like I'm in. I love doing that.
What are some of the best, resources that have helped you on your journey the last couple years?
I have two podcasts that I listen to. One is this one, and I also like Exit Strategy by Moise. He was the CEO of Native, and they sold to Procter and Gamble for 100 million. I think they bring in, uh, he brings in a lot of great speakers who give you a different perspective on what it takes to grow a brand, and these are brands that are doing 100 plus million a year. So I think that adds some perspective to it. One of the other things is I just read a ton of books on marketing, and I'm constantly also, I found that like Twitter, I follow a lot of e-commerce people, and you get a lot of good information there on like what's happening, not only on a short-term basis, but like long-term trends that are happening. So I think those are the three things that I bounce around on.
What's your Twitter handle? Are you active there?
I'm not really active there. I think I will be eventually. Uh,
I know at one point you posted something, you were like,
yeah,
you were going to do a bunch of posts,
yeah. And then I kind of
but,
dropped out because I've been so busy.
but then your business started growing 70% a month.
Yeah, then I was like, I don't know if I can do this. You can add me. I think it's like Justin Maddahi. You can, if you find me, just add me to it. I'll definitely do something eventually. So just, I think you just have to wait for that. But like following Austin, Andrew, David Herman, I think is good. There's this other Twitter username, digitally native social savannah. I follow like 30, 40 different people and just learning their perspective on what's happening and seeing the trends.
I think it's totally an underrated platform for people who are really into Twitter. Like it's really, Twitter, unlike Facebook or other social platforms, it's hard because you have to curate, and like the way that Twitter onboards you is really terrible. They're
Yeah.
like, follow all these news organizations that are just pumping news to you, when
Yeah.
really Twitter's about individuals and interesting individuals. I
Yeah.
mean, speaking of exit strategy, I want to get Moise on the podcast.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to get on and talk about it. It'd be great to go in depth with him about his journey at Native. So if you're listening and you know Moise, I'd love to be connected and see if he would come on. Last question for you, I think. I think the last question.
Hmm.
It's so one of the things I've been thinking a lot about recently is uh, freedom, and what freedom means to different people, and how that like shows up in their pursuit of goals and in their the way that they operate their life. What does freedom look like and mean to you?
I think freedom means for me is when I feel the most free is when I overcome some sort of adversity or overcome some barrier. So like in the beginning of COVID, I remember in like the first 2 weeks of March, like shit hit the fan and we weren't performing as well. And I think a lot of companies weren't because they were adjusting to the new time, like the just the buying patterns changed. But then once we figured it out and we were able to start growing again really rapidly, I think that was some of the I was having the time of my life because like I was able to produce growth and you overcame something. So I think that's one aspect of when I feel the most free. And also when I'm just with family and friends and socializing and having a good time and not worrying about the problems that are happening in the business or anything like that. And you're actually like in the present. I think that's also when you're actually free and just alive.
I feel the same way,
Yeah.
especially over the last 4 or 5 months since COVID. It's been interesting how during that period of quarantine, you were so restricted from family and friends,
Yeah.
and going back, it felt so refreshing to go back and spend time, and I valued it so much more. I'm going to have
Yeah.
one last question in for you, which is, what are you curious about right now? What are something that you're thinking about or interested in as you look to the future?
I think one of the things that my focus has gone to is what is going to be the long-term impacts of COVID, because I definitely think it's shifted the way that people buy and the way they think about like either they're going to buy it on online or retail or the things that they're going to buy. And one of the things I think I was listening to Gary Vee, and he was talking about how I think it either was a Black Plague or there was something like that that brought about like a new advent of companies who were able to succeed on it, such as Lysol and other companies on killing bacteria. So I'm interested to see what's going to be the long term impacts and how is this going to change the way people think about products uh, from now on and how they think about viruses in general. Um, Another thing that I'm interested is also like what's going to be the impact that this is going to have on quarter four, because quarter four is usually a more competitive time in terms of CPMs. And there's been a bunch of like huge companies, like there was we're ending off the July ban of Facebook ads, but there's been a bunch of huge companies that just turned off their advertising from March, April, and May. I wonder what they're going to spend in quarter four to make up all that revenue because they have investors and uh, they have a stock price to keep up. So I'm just interested how all of this is gonna come together over the next 6 to 12 months.
And not only do they have a investors in the stock price to keep up, but they have marketing teams who have marketing budgets
Yeah,
that they have to
spend.
they have to spend, right? It's like the military. They have budgets that they have to spend or they don't get them back. So they're highly incentivized to just dump that budget on certain things and spend it on anything that they, you know, to make sure that the next year they get that same amount.
Yeah,
It'll be definitely interesting.
yeah, it's gonna be a fun time.
Yeah. The long-term effects of COVID are around purchasing habits and the way people think. I vacillate between two beliefs. One of them is my more optimistic side. I believe that people will take this as an opportunity to uh, value their health more, right,
Yeah,
and choose products that help them in their immune systems, and that, you recognize the value of being healthy because of, I feel like this has been such a strong wake up call for some people.
Yeah.
And that will probably continue. And then on the flip side of it, I'm not as optimistic. And I think that it might just lead to people buying more space for themselves or disconnecting further from each other.
Yeah, it's hard to know how people are going to react,
Yeah.
it's just, and it's also over a longer period of time than you think. I remember my dad was telling me when 9/11 happened, which was really tragic. The airline businesses, it took 10 years for them to recover. So people don't know, you don't know how much fear that a virus can create, and this sort of being locked up and cooped up in in your house or your apartment for 6 months, what it does to people psychologically. So these are the things that, I think even as a media buyer, you have to understand where people are at and how people feel. And a lot of people can look at the numbers and say oh, what's going on? Why aren't people buying right now? But you have to understand psychologically, some people are thinking oh, there might be a recession and I need to ration everything that I buy and I need to be more frugal. And so you need to think about it, all the different factors that come into someone purchasing a product.
There was also, weird factors that went into the purchasing habits when people felt that our supply chain was going to be broken down.
Yeah.
There was a product hoarding mentality that pushed, I think, a lot of demand forward for certain products.
Oh, 100%.
And then you're dealing with that, which is a really confusing. One of the things you mentioned was inventory is so hard to manage.
Yeah.
And it makes it even harder when there's a lot of rational or irrational hoarding going on.
So I think now people are starting to see the backlash of that, where it's gotten actually harder to sell products and to sell certain categories. I know I have some friends that were in the face mask category, and March and April, it didn't matter what your website looked like, where you sold, if it was on Amazon, not on Amazon, you could sell nonstop. And now it's very hard to sell face masks because so many people hoarded all of the products and they have all the face masks that they think they need. So it's industries are constantly changing, the economy is constantly changing, the consumer confidence is constantly changing, and you need to adapt to it and understand what's happening.
No, great tips, man. I want to be respectful of your time and wrap it up. I know you're growing very fast and you are hiring.
Yeah.
And I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk about just someone's listening and is excited about the journey and what you guys are doing. What are some of the things you're looking to hire for? And what are you trying to bring in?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think both my dad and I have a good understanding is that you always need to hire people who are smarter than you in certain aspects. So in terms of the marketing, one of the things that we're looking for is to hire a chief marketing officer, chief strategy officer type of role who has a lot of experience with emerging brands who are very successful. I think that's one thing that we're looking at pretty heavily right now, is we want to take our company to the next level. And we know that in order to do that, we need someone who has experience with marketing on different channels and who also understands our brand. Because that's one of the most important things when you're hiring, is someone who knows your brand and knows your audience. So that's one thing that we're looking for. So if anyone's listening, you can email me at justin@oralessentials.com and we can talk.
Justin, thanks so much, man, for hopping on and sharing an update. I think of it kind of like a time capsule.
Yeah, I know.
What's happening? I fully expect in another 6 to 8 months, a year, that come back and you'll have a whole new set of revelations that you've learned during this process.
If I can come back in the next 6 months and we've grown even more, I would be a happy man. So
yeah. We'll answer some of those Q4 questions.
Thank you, man.
All right, here we go. Well, it don't matter. You got money. You ain't got no soul.
Hey guys, it's Austin. And if you've been loving the podcast, you got to go check out brandgrowthexperts.com. That's where I work one-on-one with my clients to help them build faster growing, more profitable online stores. I've got coaching programs and workshops that we host all over the world. Would love to have you come check it out. If you're a fast growing e-commerce business or you want to be a fast growing e-commerce business, you got to check it out. That's the spot for you. We go more in depth than we do in the podcast with comprehensive trainings and coaching to help you scale up. Check it out, brandgrowthexperts.com. See you there.